Oh yeah. No, that's bam. It went. All right, let me fix this so we can see ourselves a little better, and then the chat will
Okay,
pop up there on the screen as well. Well,
cool.
anyway, hello. It's June 11th. Welcome to the humidity of the Northeast. Um, oh, and I meant to ask you before we started. Ceora? Is that how I pronounce
Yes.
it? It
Yeah,
is.
you
Okay.
got it right. Yeah.
All right. So it's pretty. It's phonetic then. I was looking.
Yes.
I'm like, I should ask because I guarantee I'm probably saying it wrong, but I
No,
wasn't.
everyone actually gets it right on the first try. I've never had anyone get it wrong because it's super, like you
Amazing.
said, it's phonetic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Well, welcome. As we were talking about before we started, like, I don't really have a format for this. I just wanted to meet you and chat about content because one thing you had pointed out in your LinkedIn, and I think it's also on your Twitter in the like info, is content creation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like super into that right now
Yeah.
for the job, and I always like to just pick people's brains and see like what works for
Yeah.
them, what doesn't, what kind of content you engage with, like what really
Yeah.
resonates with you.
Yeah.
So yeah, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Ceora. I have been in the DevRel space for the past, like, I want to say four-ish, for like about 4 years of my career. I'm currently actually transitioning into a different kind of role, which I'm happy to talk more about as well.
Yeah.
But I'm in like a really interesting phase of my career in the tech industry. Like I said, I got my start in like developer education and developer marketing, and then I became a developer advocate, I think, in 2021. And so have had lots of ups and downs doing that work, mostly ups, fortunately. And now I was let go from my last job in November. And
Mm,
so I took some time to kind of like recalibrate and kind of figure out, what am I doing with my life? Like, what am I doing with my
yeah.
career? Is this what I really want? The last role that I had wasn't actually a developer advocacy role. It was a learning and development role. And so I was kind of like, after experiencing being on an L&D team, I was like, what am I doing? Like, what do I want to do? And I kind of came to the conclusion that I wanted to be a solutions engineer, which is also very similar to the work that developer advocates do. You're just like directly in the sales pipeline.
Mm,
And so, yeah, all that to say, that's kind of what's been going on with me. I'm excited though, because moving into solutions engineering, one of the appeals to me is that I really like doing content. When you're a developer advocate, at least at the jobs that I've had, a lot of times you kind of have to follow a certain script and do certain like specific types of content that like your manager might be asking you for, and you got to write about specific topics that your manager is asking you for. And moving away from a developer advocacy role and doing something else professionally, like in day to day, for me is exciting because I really am excited about the opportunity to get to just do what I want. I
yeah.
haven't been able to do that for a really long time.
Sure.
And I remember when I got into developer advocacy, like I was interviewing for a role, and there was somebody else who had been a software engineer who was also interviewing for a developer advocacy role. But I remember her telling me like that was one of the drawbacks for her, was that like she likes to do content, but she's like, if she has to do it for her day to day, like, am I going to like it anymore? Is it going to become
Mm,
tedious? And I think that's kind of what started to happen with me. I was so like tuned in with my work and doing content and talks for my job that I didn't really do anything on my personal blog. It's like after like 2022, it's like empty, right? So
yeah. Yeah.
I want to get that kind of like up and running again, where I can write about whatever I want and make videos about whatever I want. And that's kind of like the space that I'm in now. So I'm really excited because I hope that doing that, I can still kind of like collaborate with some of my DevRel friends, because I'm still really connected to that
Yeah.
world because it's just full of great people. I just, I never want to get rid of that community. So hopefully that'll give me the opportunity to like build on my own and also still collaborate with a lot of my folks. So yeah.
Your chums. Holy cow, a lot to
Yeah.
unpack there. You said
Yeah.
like so many things. No, it was awesome though. Like that was like such an elevator pitch like bio, but like you covered so many. Okay. So you went from DevRel, leaned more into solutions engineer. Can you talk about, because I think a lot of people see developer advocacy roles and they're like, oh, this looks so fun. But you touched on so many things there too that like might make it less appealing to people.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of similarities in perhaps solutions engineers. So could you maybe talk about some of the parallels that you've seen so far in those two roles?
Yeah, so the thing I want to start off by saying is like one of the biggest benefits of developer advocacy is it's such a cross-functional role.
Mm,
And it's also like a very like hybrid-esque role where you're doing a bunch of different things at one time. You're doing marketing, you're doing a little bit of sales sometimes, you're
yeah,
doing like some engineering work, some product work, you're doing a bunch of different stuff, working across a bunch of different sectors at the company you work for. And that's positive because it can be such a great springboard into new roles. So
yeah,
all that to say, like I said, there were some things about like developer advocacy that were starting to burn me out a little bit, and like I had been laid off before, and it just was like, okay, what am I doing? Like, where am I at? And so I kind of started to in my mind categorize the things that I really liked about developer advocacy and the things that I didn't like so much. And one of the things I liked is interacting with developers or
yeah,
customers. I really like to talk to people. I like to like get to explain technical concepts. I like to convince people that this is the best technical option for you, our product, our software, whatever it is. That whole process for me is really, really appealing. Because at my core, what I really like to do is teach. And
okay,
that's a big part of what you do as a developer advocate. You're just teaching developers new stuff. And I just love that whole process. And so I had actually last year when I this is so crazy. When I went through two layoffs last year. So when I was laid off from my job in March, I think, of 2025, I kind of like reached out to a bunch of people in my community and was like, who wants to have a conversation? I just was having coffee chats with people.
yeah,
And I met with someone who worked at Microsoft and he was a solutions engineer there. And he kind of said, like, I think that you should look into solutions engineering because it could be like a really good, like, you have a lot of like parallel skills that you've already
hmm,
developed, et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of was like, okay, whatever. And I didn't really pursue it any further. But this time around, when I was job searching and I had taken a couple months to just rest and relax and travel a little bit. And then when I returned to LinkedIn and I just was looking at all the jobs that were available, and I was like, what am I doing? What am I qualified for? What do I actually want? Because I wanted to be super targeted in the roles that I was applying for. Because
sure,
sometimes, like, especially with the way that the job market is, you can get into that survival mode of like, I'm just going to apply for everything
mm,
because I just need a job. And like that method, I get why people want to do things that way, but I just started to realize quickly, like, it's much better and it's a much better use of my time if I'm like aiming for specific technology stacks and specific titles instead of just applying for everything. And so I started to think about the skills that I had and the things, like I said, that I like to do when I was a developer advocate. I didn't really like how ambiguous our standard for success was. Sometimes the constant travel was a lot. Like there were months where I was just basically living out of my suitcase, and I was like, I don't really know if I like that. But I
yeah,
also did really like it because I love to travel and it was fun going to conferences. So I'm like categorizing the things I do and don't like. And I returned to the solution engineer role because I remembered that conversation I had. And so to finally answer your question about like some of the similarities between the two, like I said, solutions engineers are customer facing, right? Like
mhm,
what they basically do is they're the technical forefront of the sales process. So when you have a new client that is like in your sales pipeline, and maybe you have like a sales rep or an account executive who's been like, okay, this is a person that I think would be a good option for us to pursue, like kind of integrating into our product, right? So when you that lands into your hands as a solutions engineer, it's basically your job to build the demos to demonstrate that what the product can do. It's your job to kind of ask the customer questions about like what they're looking for, what their tech stack is, what their constraints are, what any compliance things they have to like follow along with, all this kind of stuff to really see if this customer can work with this product and how this customer can work with this product and how the product can actually help the customer. So you're asking questions, you're doing a
mm,
bit of discovery, and then from that point, you might build a demo to demonstrate for them like this is what it can do. And then you might build a proof of concept. So maybe you have like the chance to actually integrate the product into their like stack and really demonstrate to them like this is how it could actually help you in your day to day. And so that's honestly very similar to what developer advocates do, like, right? Like we're doing workshops
yeah,
where we're demoing things, we're doing talks where we're addressing like issues that developers have and how the product can help them. You're just doing this on like a smaller scale, and you also are closer to the revenue, because that was something I was thinking about too. I was like, I don't want to be laid off again.
yeah,
I do
sure,
not want to be laid
sure,
off again. And like I think that developer advocacy is such a like it's like I loved the role. I think it's like such an interesting job. And I think that we're in a phase now in the tech industry, thankfully, where companies are starting to realize the value of developer advocacy. But there was a phase for like a few months, I feel like, when it was like there were not that many jobs and
mm,
a lot of developer advocates were getting laid off left and right. And one of the reasons why is because it can be hard to prove the actual monetary value of developer advocacy, especially if you don't work on a team that's used to doing that. So with solutions engineering, you're doing a lot of the similar things, but you are in the sales pipeline. Like you can directly tie this to, we signed a $1 million contract based off of the work that I was doing, and that's really positive for me. That's like great job security. So those are like some of the things that I have been kind of thinking about. And when I was applying for roles, I was like, I don't know if anyone's going to hire me because I have never been a solutions engineer before. Like at the end of the day, I've actually never done that job. I've done lots of parts of it at different companies and different roles, but I've never formally been a solutions engineer. I'm right now interviewing though for a solutions engineer role.
Hey,
so
okay.
Fingers crossed that I actually landed and I can like actually see like proof that my experience as a developer advocate applies here. But I think it's like a very natural progression. I would even wager that like if a company is thinking about like restructuring or like laying off their DevRel team, like don't lay off those talented people. Just make them solutions engineers so that they can like actually sign deals for real this time, because the skills in it. I also feel like developer advocacy, having to do those things on stage in front of like hundreds of people and like do like run demos and your code is not working and you got to figure out how to get around that while like 100 people are watching you. Like that's so high pressure. If you could do that, you definitely can sit with a client one-on-one and be like, so yeah, I think we'll see if my little career pivot works, but I think it will. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. Fingers crossed. Good morning to everybody in the chat, by the way. I see people over here talking. I didn't want to ignore them because they're why we're here. We like to hang out with our friends in the community. So I see so many parallels, and I think that like that's a great transition role from like developer advocate to solutions engineer, because again, it checks a lot of very similar boxes. What round of interviews are you in, if you don't mind me asking?
So I'm in the second round for the solutions engineer role. And it's really interesting because this is my first time going through a solutions engineer like interview process. And I'm like kind of keeping track of like what are the differences, what are the kind of like parallels between the two, and also like what does the process look like in comparison between like for a developer advocate. So one of the things that's really different is obviously you have to like actually really know the sales process and what the sales pipeline is and what like a technical evaluation is and all that kind of stuff. And like those are not things that you have to formally know as a developer advocate, like because you are kind of involved in the sales pipeline sometimes, but not like fully. And so that was something that I had to learn. There's also different like sales methodologies that like a lot of companies like live by that you have to learn as well. And then as a solutions engineer, a lot of times because you are helping a customer see how the product can fit into their infrastructure, you also have to know a lot about software architecture because you have to be able to know like where this actually sits in their stack, how it's going to interact with the other parts of their stack. Is it going to cause any disruptions in any part of their stack? You have to know all that kind of stuff. And so this is kind of where like, if I think about like, sometimes as a developer advocate or even a software engineer, you're focused on a very niche piece of the stack or a niche part of the software. Solutions engineer, because you are trying to help a customer fit this into their broader architecture, you have to know those broader things. I happen to really enjoy software architecture. I actually enjoy discussing that more than I actually enjoy coding. So for me, it's exciting to get to do that, but that is also a different like skill set that has to be learned to be able to like do a solutions engineer role.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I'm wondering more as far as like the solutions engineer role, because you mentioned architecture, and I think that that's really important. Like, do you, and I'm just kind of spitballing questions here because I work with some of our solutions architects as well. Do you think it's important to kind of understand like what the client or like what industry they're in to sort of also make it applicable to what you're doing, like to show them how the software or the product fits into what they're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. It also like very similar to developer advocacy, like every company kind of does solution engineering different. There are some where like you are actually focused on a specific product sector, like AI. Like you're the one who's going to work with all our AI clients and et cetera and so forth. And I think that like I really like that kind of method because you become an expert in that like niche, because there are like similarities between like a certain sector of tech and the architecture that they're going to use, you know.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
also another really interesting thing that is happening now is that like companies software architecture is changing because of AI. Like there's now an AI layer or an agent layer in someone's architecture. How does that interact with every other piece that's already there, and the piece you're trying to add
Yeah.
as the solutions engineer? Like there's a lot to like think about
Yeah.
there, and it's an ever evolving kind of practice. And I think it's a really interesting place to be because you take things really high level. And I like to look at things from a bird's eye view, because that's where things start to get really interesting, and that's where you really start to get into like the intersection between software and business. Because when you're looking at things from an architectural perspective, you're not really trying to like have the best line of code or like format your API in the best way, even though that can become important. It's about like, how can we make sure that this is the most cost effective and efficient structure that it can be, so that we don't have issues we have to pay millions of dollars for 5 years down the line? Like that's such an interesting thing to me. And as a developer advocate in the role that I was in, I like never really, I didn't interact with that kind of thing as much.
Sure,
I kind of
sure.
started to as I like developed my seniority at my last role, and
Yeah.
I got laid off. But all that to say, it's really like for me, it's like a natural progression to my engineering skills as well, because a lot of times that's what happens when you're a senior engineer. You start to kind of like look at things from more of a bird's eye view and think more about cost and efficiency and all that kind of stuff instead of just the code, or in relation to the code too. So yeah, it's really interesting, like the to kind of familiarize myself with like some of these architecture patterns. And like, yeah, it's I think, as I was saying earlier, like getting into more content creation on my own, like this is definitely going to be the thing that I write a lot about because I find it
Yeah.
so interesting. So yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, I smell some sort of a solutions architect, like zero to hero course coming from you. I feel like there's some good content. I mean, you're doing it. Like you're your own
Yeah.
case study.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's awesome.
So yeah. Yeah.
And you, as far as how you approach content, and I kind of want to touch on like just sort of a moral of like there's far less developer advocate roles I think out there than there are solutions architects or
Yes.
solutions engineer roles at
Yes.
companies. So if you're interested in developer advocate roles, like maybe also kind of look into those because it can satisfy or check a lot of the similar boxes.
Yes.
um when you approach content, like, what's your workflow for that? Like, do you come up with an idea? And obviously, having the background as a DA, it's a little bit different because, like you had mentioned earlier, we are typically told what we have to make. So, when you're doing it for yourself, how do you sort of approach that workflow?
So I approach it very similarly to kind of how I like earlier you mentioned how I'm basically like the guinea pig.
Yeah,
That's kind of how I view my content for me personally. Is like, well, if I'm curious about this thing and I'm struggling with this thing, I'm sure other people are, so I'm just going to
sure.
publish this. That's like my process. It's really simple. That's why I like to do it for myself personally, because I don't really think about like what's trendy or what's going to get the most clicks or what's going to
Mhm.
get the most signups or anything
Yeah,
like that. It is literally just like, if a year from now, I'm like trying to brush up on this topic, I want to be able to go back to my own content on it. Like that's basically what
yeah,
I think. And a lot of times that ends up being things that are also really interesting to a lot of other developers. Like one of the things I realized as a person who has participated in a lot of meetings where I was like the most junior person, and I've also taken a lot of classes, I'm always going to ask questions because 9 times out of 10, someone else in the room has the same question and they just are too afraid to ask. And that's kind of how I
yeah,
see content. It's like, I'm curious about this because I don't know what's going on. So I'm just going to put this out there because I'm sure other people are curious about it too. And especially now, the really interesting thing is that, like, what I've noticed is that AI is like the biggest topic in the industry, and it has been for the past couple of years. But I think that there's still a huge lack of like AI literacy. I think a lot of people don't really know what's going on, and like
yeah,
they confuse certain terms with each other and all that kind of stuff. So that also for me is like a draw sometimes. Like if I see what people are talking about and I can see that people don't have like a large enough amount of people don't really have a correct understanding of a certain topic, that's when I'm like, okay, let me put this out there for, especially for like more junior people or people who are
yeah.
new to a topic. That's when I kind of start to get into that like more community driven focus when it's like, well, this is what people are talking about, and I can tell that people are confused. And since I understand it, I might as well just put this together. So it's like two categories of like, I didn't know this thing, I researched it. Here's what I found out, and also I've seen people talking about this. Let me write about this so I can like kind of fill that gap for people.
I like that approach. As you were saying that, and as far as like understanding certain like terminologies or abbreviations and stuff, I'm like, I I would imagine that some people that are kind of watching these high level, like the Theos and the Scott Hanselmans and all these like really
Mm-hmm.
deep knowledge, like all the talking and all the terms that like it can get confusing. It's like, where do you even start? So I think it also becomes paralysis from analysis, or there's just too many options. So I
Yeah.
think having somebody out there to kind of make sure that the content's available for everyone is great, because I'm sitting here and you were saying, I'm like, yeah, there's like ACP, MCP, all of these, and I'm like, which one's
Yes.
which? And it's like you look at it and like, where do I even start?
Yeah, yeah,
So
and that can become like super, super overwhelming. And like
mhm,
one of the things about me is I have never forgotten what it felt like in 2020 when I first got into the industry and I didn't know what was going on. I was like
yeah.
constantly like, what are we talking about? Like with observability, and like there was like the Jamstack thing was like really popular at the
Oh
time.
yeah,
And I was
yeah.
like, what is this? Like I just was so confused. And I got my start because I did a program, a cloud DevOps engineering program. So I'm like totally know nothing about anything, and I'm dropped into cloud DevOps engineering. I'm like, what is happening? And the thing that I realized was like every tutorial I read and like the course that I was going through, they just assumed that I knew certain things that I didn't actually know. I was like, I actually don't know what this means. I
Yeah.
have no familiarity with this like computer science terminology that most people learn in their degree program that I didn't do. So I'm like, I don't know what's happening. And so thinking about like that perspective of like reading an article and just being so lost at the end of it because they use so much like conflated terms and terminology that I've just never heard of, and like the explanations aren't making any sense. I always think about that. And so I think what a lot of people need, especially because AI is so new and it's so unfamiliar, and like there are a lot of people out there who are AI expert, but most of us aren't. Like most people don't really know that much about AI. Most of us are just kind of figuring it out. And I consider myself one of those people too. Like I'm just
Yeah.
like learning the ropes, and I'm trying to learn them now, especially because AI has matured a little bit and it seems like it's going to stick around. But all that to say, what people need is direction. Like there is a lot of like hype and a lot of like grifting and a lot of this and that and things that like seem really attractive, but then they end up going away and not being
Yep.
that big of a deal. So it's like how which direction should we go in? And because I kind of have this is how I'm also gauging my progress in my career and like my seniority. I kind of feel like I have a better gauge of like what to focus on and what not to, that like some people maybe don't have, especially because I've like worked with teams that were trying to integrate AI into their like workflow and all that kind of stuff. So all that to say, if you're a person who is like opinionated and has like a preference, and you know what direction you feel like you should be going in, that's like really important right now, because a lot of people are directionless and a little bit confused. And like I think for myself, sometimes I obsess over having the right answer, but I think right now it's just good to have a answer. Like if this is
Sure.
what you think it works, like talk about it and share it with people and let people argue you down and also give you other suggestions and like maybe prove you wrong or prove you right, whatever. But it's just better to start than to just like kind of stall. And that's what I'm like when I was a junior, I was like, that whole process was so scary for me because I was like, I don't want to publish something on dev.to and have some like,
Yeah.
guy
Oh,
who's like a staff engineer at fucking Meta, like
yeah.
being like, this is wrong. Yes,
Actually,
yes, exactly.
yeah.
I was so terrified of that. But now I'm like, actually, maybe that's not that big of a deal and I can actually learn something, because I've been like a little bit more vocal about AI on Twitter and actually asking people questions and engaging with these conversations. And I've learned so much just because I'm like, I don't care if I'm wrong or right. I don't care if I'm actually using these terms wrong. Somebody can correct me and I'll learn something. That's kind of the phase that I'm in right now when it comes to AI. So yeah.
I think that initiating conversations and getting dialogue going is the best way to learn, but you have
Yes.
to approach it from like that open-minded, like I'm
Yeah.
putting this out there to explore and expand my knowledge, not to say my opinion is right or wrong,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
So I love that. Oh, you said something in there too, and I mean you said a ton of things, so I'm just trying to remember which one I wanted to jump at first. I where would, if you were to kind of give somebody a roadmap right now, as far as like the big AI bubble, like where would you kind of direct them? Also, oh, actually, put a pin in that. I wanted to get to Michael's comment here. The market is
Mm,
rough right now, and I feel like it's a numbers game of spamming out resumes. Sad, and then a
yeah.
smiley face. You wrote sad, and then put a smiley face. So I'm a little not sure how I feel about that, but that's fine. I just wanted you to comment on that because I think the way you've approached it, as far as just like scattershot resumes, you're doing the opposite, where it is kind of more intentional. How
Yeah.
are you approaching the job market right now?
Yeah, that's a great question because like the job market is like really different than it was even just a year ago. Like, and the tech job market has been a little bit volatile for the past few years, but it's volatile in a different way now. And so like I said, I kind of was just I took like a month to just like scroll through LinkedIn and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing or if I should just even try to apply. And what I was kind of focused on primarily was preserving my energy because
Mm,
being rejected and like sending out resumes and not getting a reply is like really demoralizing.
yeah,
And
takes
it
its
can
toll on
really
you.
yes, and it
Yeah,
can really affect your confidence as a professional, right? Like because you can start thinking like is my experience not good enough? Am I not good enough? Like all those questions can come into your mind. And so I was like, I want to avoid that because I don't need that kind of energy in my life.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
was thinking to myself, like, let me be more targeted, right? Like, let me actually really write down what I like to do, the type of role that I'm looking for, and the type of technology that I want to work with too. That was another thing that I was like, let me be a little bit more specific with that because there was a time when I would just apply to any company, regardless of the technology that was like in the software that they were building, because I just was like, well, I can learn anything, which is true, but
Yeah.
like maybe I don't want to learn everything. Like
Sure,
maybe there are
sure.
certain things I'm more interested in than others. And I think it's good to lean into that now because we are kind of in that like specialist economy where it's good to have like a thing that you know really, really well. So I was thinking about those things, and that's when I kind of realized like I really like infrastructure. I really like working on API stuff and on the back end of things. And so one of the other things that I have been thinking about is like how can I get my foot in the door? Because the other thing that people have to understand now too, which is different even from like a year ago, is most companies are using AI to like look through resumes, right? I just read something, a paper I think from Stanford, where they were saying that like a lot of companies will have like the AI read through it and it'll give you a score, and like that score will kind of like stay in their system for a really long time. So even if you apply again, the score that it gave you the first time is like takes the precedent, right? So
Yeah.
that's all they you can redo your resume a million times, but if you're applying to the same company, it's just going to like still have that score. And so that's like demoralizing, right? Because it's like, well, it doesn't really matter how like you can try your best to like make sure you have specific phrases from the job description and all that kind of stuff, and it still might not be enough. I
Mhm.
remember like when I would be job searching in 2021 and 2022, I could apply to like a job board or companies like, job portal and get an interview. That's really not the case anymore, which means that you really do have to really like lean on your network. I have tried the like, let me hire, like message the hiring manager on LinkedIn. That really didn't get me play. The thing that has helped me the most is relying on people that I know and like getting referrals through that. And like if you're someone who's new to the industry, that can be really, really intimidating. But like that was also how I got in the industry in the first place, was I just networked my ass off. And so you kind of still have to do that. And that's also the beauty of being in DevRel is you know so many people. So your network is like usually very like amazing and really well nurtured. And so I was able to lean on my network. Another thing that I would recommend people do, and I might be jumping the gun a little bit because like I said, I'm interviewing for this job. I don't know if I'm going to get it yet, but I want to like fingers crossed. I got to say that every time I talk about this.
Sure.
But all that to say, people should also look into going to places they used to work before. Like I think that's an
Mm,
option that like a lot of people haven't talked about. I actually know of someone else who was looking for a senior software engineer role and decided to go back to a place he had an internship with a few years ago. And so a lot of times for me, I've kind of just assumed, like, kind of taken the mindset of like, if I work there, I work there, and that's like in my past. But I have been looking at roles at companies that I used to work for, because especially if like my team is still there, the team that I used to work with is still there, because now
Yeah.
you have people internally who can vouch for you. And for me, applying for a role that I've never done before, having that extra leg up of having worked with the product, worked on a team, and also knowing people who can vouch for me internally is like a huge plus. So that's something that people should also really consider. I've kind of seen people do this with bigger companies, especially Microsoft. People who worked at Microsoft love to go back to Microsoft later in their career.
Yeah.
But it's something that like is also an option. Think about the places you've worked before and see if that's like an option for you too. So yeah.
I think you are the first person that I've heard say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, but I don't feel like anybody's ever really mentioned that. And I've talked to
Yeah.
several people over the years over like jobs and hiring and how to approach that stuff. And I mean, it's like, so you're like, oh, duh, why wouldn't I do that? But it totally makes
It's
sense.
not, yeah, it's not obvious though, right? Like it
Mm,
seems like when you hear it, it's like, oh duh, I forgot I could do that. But like
yeah,
no one does it, right? Like I just thought like, well, I only worked here for a year and like maybe the people there didn't really like working with me. And I was like thinking all these thoughts. And then I just was like, whatever, let me just reach out to the people I used to know who worked there. And it has worked out so far in my favor. We'll see if I get the job. But it's also like, I think for people that are, um, this is one of the reasons why there's two things that I'm thinking of right now. Number one, it's really important not to burn bridges. Like
yeah,
even if you kind of had a sucky experience somewhere, I always try to, unless it's like really, really like something really volatile that needs to like be handled legally or something like that, obviously. But like other
sure.
than that, I try to leave things as like pristine as I can, right? Because I don't want to, and that is really important because I've done that, I can go back to places now because I
Yeah.
still have a good reputation with the companies that I've worked for. And then what was the other thing that I wanted to bring up? It totally slipped my mind. But all that to say, yeah, it's like it's one of those things that is just not, it's not something that people often think about. And
Sure.
I honestly came to this conclusion by accident. I had like posted on LinkedIn and I was like, does anyone know any solutions engineers who would want to talk to me? This was maybe like 2 months ago. And someone who was working at a company I used to work for was like, you should talk to this guy who does solutions engineering here. And I'm like, okay. And talking to him kind of reinvigorated me. And then I saw that they were hiring for a solutions engineer. And so I reached back out and was like, hey, and also reached out to someone else who I knew, who I had
Yeah.
worked with directly. And they were kind of vouching for me internally. And that's how I was able to get the interview. So that's like an option. And I like, when I did it, it just was like, oh my gosh, this is something you can do. Like,
Yeah.
I just didn't even realize, but it's definitely something I want to talk about more because I think a lot of people have tried the referral thing and like they've tried tailoring their resume a million times. And now I'm like, go back to where you used to be if you can. Like if there's if they're hiring and you know, especially if you still like some of your original team still works there, definitely take a shot with that for sure.
Yeah, Seth, I don't necessarily think it would be relevant for your pest control prior experience since you are trying to transition into tech. But for anybody that maybe is in tech that has had a couple jobs down the road or removed your like a couple jobs removed from a role, it's always good to look back, especially if you had rapport and you left on good terms. I think there's a couple caveats there, but so let's see. We talked about the job thing and the solutions engineer stuff. What I do want to get more into the content thing, and you and I had been talking to, you had wanted to kind of get back more into live streaming as well. What would that be? What would that look like for you? Like, what sort of content do you do as far as live streams? You're doing like more demos type stuff, tutorial type stuff?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably demos because like honestly, I'm like I really okay, probably demos and working on my personal projects. And I say my personal projects because I'm a chronic procrastinator with my projects.
I think a lot of us are guilty of that.
Yes, exactly. So I'll start a project and I'll be like, oh my gosh, this is so great. This is like going to be my new on my website and all this stuff. And then it'll fizzle out. And so live streaming for me is a huge accountability thing because it's like people are watching me. So I
Yeah.
got to work on
Yeah.
this project. So I think that I'm going to probably take that route. I'm also really seriously considering doing some sort of like uh AI like educational something where it's like let's actually like teach and walk through AI together in a really approachable way just because like again we're at a phase with the way that AI has progressed over, especially over the past year,
Yeah.
where there's a lot of new stuff that people are there are like engineers who are on Twitter and LinkedIn talking about it like we all know what's going on and it's like we don't. So I want to like do something with that because
Yeah.
I really think like even when I was talking earlier about like job searching and how hard that can be, people kind of need to have that AI edge at this point. Like you kind of need
Oh
to go
yeah.
into an interview and talk about it. And you might even need that on your current job to like keep your current job. And so like we should be obsessed basically with educating people on that so that they can have the most job security possible. And also try to see if they can make like AI, integrate AI efficiently into their current workflows. But
Yeah.
first and foremost, it's like this is the AI thing is not going anywhere. I remember when it first kind of started out, I was like, is this going to be like NFTs where like it comes up and then it kind of
Sure.
fizzles out and no
Yeah.
one cares anymore? Or is this going to stick? And it's been sticking. And like
Yeah.
at the very least, regardless of how you feel about the efficacy of AI and the ROI of it and all that kind of stuff, regardless, you still need to know what's going on. And so I do want to do something where it's like, here's how you can know what's going on with AI. Like this is actually what's happening. So yeah.
You said NFTs. Wow. I haven't even thought
I
like
know.
that has not come
I
across my
know.
mind in so long.
Yeah.
Last question here, and then we'll kind of wrap up. And thank you again
Okay.
for hanging out. This has been super
Yeah.
fun. Hopefully, everybody
Yeah.
in the chat was able to glean some wonderful tidbits here. NFTs, exactly, Will. That's what I'm saying. That I swear to God, I have not heard that like phrase in a long time. You were talking. I'd asked you, and I put a pin in it. And I remember now it was about AI. If you're kind of directing people on where to like start, so maybe they don't feel as lost or just overwhelmed at everything, like what would be the workflow for that?
Yeah, so I think that people should start first with learning the terms. You should learn what an LLM is, how they work. You should learn what an agent is, and then you should learn what agentic workflows are. I think I'm saying that because I think that like those are the keys to understanding at least the conversations that are happening.
Mm,
And those are the keys to be able to speak about AI with some level of proficiency in meetings or in interviews, whatever. I think you should start there. And that will also kind of open up your curiosity because sometimes you'll be so unfamiliar with the topic that you can't even ask questions because you're like, I don't even know what to ask questions about. But I
yeah,
think
like
if you
where do you
start with,
start?
yeah, I think if you start with those things of like LLMs, agents, and research that a little bit and figure that out, I think it's also really positive to try to work with AI if you can. Depending on like what your team's budget is, because we got that token thing going on now and everything. But all that to say, especially with like the when we talk about agents, building agents, and also working with MCP, I think that's something that like if once you kind of get the the knowledge to be able to talk about it and understand the conversations that are happening and understand like the articles that are being written about AI and all that kind of stuff, try to build with it. So you can kind of get like an actual hands-on experience with it. But yeah, I think starting with understanding what LLMs are and what agents are is like the place to be right now.
Well, you heard it here, and my buddy Will Vincent here vouches for that. He's pretty smart, so I trust you too because you're both significantly more intelligent than me on all of this. So this has been great. I've got links here for everybody to come and maybe connect with you if that's cool.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
we've got the LinkedIn and the Twitter. Is this where we would also find like content that you're going to be
Yes.
creating in the near future?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. That's where it's all going to be.
Very cool. Do you have any closing thoughts you want to bestow any wisdom on these wonderful people before we get the hell out of here?
Everybody wish me luck for this interview.
Yes. When is the
Everyone
next
wish
one?
me luck. The next interview is next week, next Wednesday. Everybody, please.
All right, you
Please
got this.
cross your fingers, everybody. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Prepare. I want you to study and prepare, and then the night before, I want you to do nothing. So you just can
Yeah.
go in with a fresh
Yes.
mind. Like, don't
Yes.
overwhelm yourself. You got
Yes.
this.
Absolutely.
You got this. Well, yeah, we'll give our flowers to Ceora. Let's go. Well, this is cool. Hang out backstage for a sec so I can say thanks, but we'll say goodbye to all these
Okay.
losers first. I'm just kidding, Linda, Janet, Seth, Roxy, Will. Thanks for stopping by the way. I gave
Yeah.
Christelle some beef, somebody that we work with, because she was messaging me in the Slack here. I was like, yeah, thanks for showing up to my stream. Will showed up. So It's good to see everybody.
Yes.
And I'll leave you with my usual catchphrase. It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. So
Yes.
we'll
Absolutely.
catch you guys later.
See
Bye.
ya. Okay.